And welcome. It's Monday, 1 o'clock. Welcome to the Deal Doctor live stream once again. We have a bit of an interesting topic today. What are agents required to disclose and under what intention? And if they do or don't disclose something, are they liable? Currently, a lot of you are aware of the situation in Muskegon, where a homeowner, decided to put their property on the market and had a lot of Confederate memorabilia in the home, as well as a framed application of a Ku Klux Klan application hanging on the bedroom wall. This particular homeowner also happens to be a member of the Muskegon Police Department. Now, when you list your home, you list it to make it available to the public. And so a home buyer walked into the house, home buyer who happened to be black, walked into the house and was extremely offended. So offended, in fact, that they reported the matter to the Muskegon Police Department as well as the media. Now, I'm not here to have a conversation about whether that homeowner had the right to put that to leave that information in the house, whether or not what his intent was, and so on and so forth. I'll leave that up to the Muskegon Police and all of those folks to deal with. But what I found very interesting about that whole story is how quickly the media turned to ask the question, was the real estate agent who listed the property responsible? What responsibility did she have when she listed that property to disclose, or what were her limitations in terms of responsibility? Well, that's a really interesting question. And it's an interesting question because it goes to intent and what her limit of culpability is. So let's talk about intent for a moment. If her intent, or the homeowner's intent, was to intimidate a buyer who may potentially buy that home, and they didn't want someone who, some discriminated class to buy that property, and that was their intention, they're in clear violation of the Fair Housing Act. Now, let's pretend for a moment that the realtor had no such intent. That the realtor, in fact, let's pretend that the realtor went to the seller and said, some people who walk into your house might find those items offensive, and maybe you should take them down. I'm not comparing them by any means, but I know agents have run into situations where they've told homeowners, take down the trophy heads because some people find that repugnant or repulsive. And the homeowner has the right to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going, if that means that I'm going to get less for my property, then so be it. When I was first licensed in real estate in Farmington Hills, Michigan, I went on a listing appointment, a very exclusive gated community. The coach of the Red Wings lived there, other celebrities and sports figures, and a family lived there. He was very high up in a soft drink chain and a soft drink manufacturer. And at one point during the conversation, he looked at me and he said, "Do you think we should remove all the pictures of my family and symbols that we are African American?" And I just dropped my jaw. I didn't know what to say. I thought, and this was 30 years ago, I thought, here we are in the 1980s having this conversation. I was dumbfounded. But then I realized that he knew far more than I knew that this discrimination existed, that this prejudice existed. And I finally looked at him and I said, I find it repugnant that we even have to have this conversation, but ultimately, you know that exists far better than I do. And whatever is in your best interest, whatever you feel strongly about, is what you should do. If getting the top dollar, if exposing your home to the largest market possible, then yes, maybe removing any evidence that you're African American would be the right thing to do. On the other hand, if your heritage is important to you and you don't want to do that, I support you 100%. The problem is that it's not necessarily the agent's responsibility to force that seller, in this particular case in Muskegon, to force them to remove those items which may be offensive to a potential buyer. But you got to ask yourself a question, and it's a very serious question. How would you like the media, just a moment, how would you like the media rolling up into your driveway at your realtor office? How would you like a picture of your real estate sign in the yard with your name on it on the nightly news, with someone asking the question, should this real estate agent have responded differently when she listed the home? Wow, that's a tough question. She may not have any legal responsibility, any fair housing violation there, but the question is, if you have someone who is a seller who is that controversial that you may end up on the nightly news, then I would certainly question whether or not I wanted that listing and whether or not anyone could connect me to those kinds of values. And I'm not talking any more of that than extreme views from any side. If any of those things were to put you in a situation where you and your broker could be seen as being prejudiced, racist, unfair to one class or another, I think you have to think very, very carefully about whether or not you want that listing. Just how important is it? Because ultimately it could hurt your business. And that goes to a question of disclosure. How much do we have to disclose? What are we required legally to disclose? I'm going to switch to a little different and far less controversial topic, which is a buildable lot, a vacant land, a piece of vacant land, being described as buildable. And let's say it's a 5-acre parcel, and 4 of those acres are underwater under the DEQ, protected by the DEQ. That leaves you an acre, which just happens to be in the corner closest to the road, that you can, there's a skinny little like driveway, and you can get back and you can build your house here, maybe 100 feet from the road. Well, what happens when you get a buyer who comes along and has this dream house in mind that is going to be 3,000 square feet ranch with a swimming pool and a pole barn and a nice big lawn with a volleyball court, and they discover that they can't build their dream house in the middle of that 5 acres. Now, The truth of the matter is, they had the right to exercise their own due diligence. They had a responsibility to determine where that land was buildable. They could have had a building evaluation done, building feasibility study done, where a builder will go out and say, this is right here, the spot within that 5 acres that you can build. You can't build out here, or you can't build over here, but you can build in here. That's where you can build. And oh, by the way, there's a little drop in the terrain, and we could probably get enough drop there to build you a walkout basement. And we can put the swimming pool here, and we can put a pole barn over here. So the buyer had a responsibility to exercise due diligence, and they didn't. And so ultimately, they lost out. They lost money on the property, but we didn't completely get out unscathed, because we presented a property as buildable without any proof. We didn't have a building feasibility study. We didn't have a perk test done by the county. We didn't have an elevation study done, or any ingress, egress, or road commission approval. We didn't have any documentation other than what the seller told us, that it was a buildable piece of property. That's not enough. We have to exercise due diligence before we put a property on the market to know that we are representing that property accurately. That little tiny line down at the bottom of the multiple listing sheet that says all information must be verified, guess what? That doesn't hold up in a court. That is almost never going to protect you if there was negligence involved in exercising due diligence. So if your seller, for example, tells you that their house is 1,500 square feet, and you put that on the multiple listing sheet without verifying it, guess who's going to get in trouble? Not just the seller, but probably the real estate company, the listing agent and broker. Let's say that you list 10 acres, and the seller says to you, oh, by the way, we can get 3 splits out of this property. Who says? Would you put that on the seller's disclosure form, or would you put that on the listing contract as part of the listing if you didn't verify it with the municipality first? If you didn't verify it with the municipality first, the likelihood is that you're going to be called when they find out that there aren't any splits, that this is not a splittable lot. So I would be very, very cautious. And again, all of this goes to what we're required to do before we list something, and part of that is due diligence. We've had situations where the legal descriptions of a parcel are different at the township level versus the city level versus the county level. They may have 3 different parcel numbers or parcel descriptions. Now, if they've got 3 different parcel descriptions, well, I'd have a problem listing that parcel right out of the gate. You may be able to list it with some sort of disclaimer that says we have multiple parcel descriptions. Buyer must exercise due diligence and have a survey performed and accept the results of that survey prior to closing. But whatever you do, you have to cover yourself and your broker and your seller by asking the hard questions. Sometimes when they get global positioning global satellite pictures, you'll see that the lot lines don't match up with the lot lines on a survey. Well, you got to get that resolved somehow. So whenever you take a listing, whenever you're considering taking a listing, be very careful about what information you have and what information you're going to broadcast out there to the public, because that little line down there is probably going to be ignored by a judge when it comes down to it. The judge will probably say, did you, listing agent, exercise due diligence in providing the correct information before you put this property on the market? What was your intent when you put this property on the market? Same thing on the buyer's side. We have to exercise due diligence about what the buyer is buying. Just listening to the homeowner and listing agent say, well, it's 5 acres and it's buildable, that's not enough. You have to make your offer subject to a feasibility study by a licensed builder, by the township ingress and egress, or the road commission providing an egress from the road, and so on. All of these things, and you'll find these, by the way, in a vacant land addendum. GCAR has one. GRAR/WIMLAR has one, vacant land addendum, or vacant land purchase agreement even. And all of these kinds of things, you can make your offers subject to thorough evaluations of that property before you close, so that you don't run into a situation where you have represented a property one way and then you find yourself in court on a different day. Dom, any questions? No questions. Again, be careful out there. Be careful whenever you are putting a property on the market, that you have substantiation for whatever claims you are making about that property, and that your intent in presenting that property is not founded in any source of discrimination. So that's my thought for the day. I hope you have a great week. Go get them, and I'll see you next week.